Hey there, this is the guy who got sick after his holiday trip, and welcome to this AFK journey video. So I'm back in Singapore, right? Back in my usual setup, and I'm a little bit sick from my trip. So pardon me if I sound a little weird, I sound a little weak, and I don't sound very excited. But anyway, I'm not too excited for Ulmus, and I'll explain why. So for today's video, we are going to talk about our first impression for Ulmus. We are gonna discuss whether or not this unit is viable, and just a disclaimer, usually I have a friend who instant Supreme Plus any new units that come out, but he is not gonna instant Supreme Plus Ulmus, so I didn't pull for him to Supreme Plus because Ulmus by nature, right, this unit could be a hidden gem, but this unit has a lot in similarity to another Wilders tank, which is Danny, which we will do a cross comparison later, and you guys will hear a lot of Danny versus Almer's comparison because both of them are tanks, both of them have self-sustain, both of them have control, and they even have the same seasonal skill, right? So they are very similar by nature. So for somebody who has a really high tier Danny, to be honest, we are not sure whether or not Almer's can actually compare to her, right? If you are much lower tier, because you have to re-pull for her. And at the same time, his kit doesn't look very exciting, so we'll talk about it, but this is the reason why my friend is not going to S plus him. But nonetheless, we're going to use Z-Boss and then give our first impression based on the first day of testing. So in the future, if I have other people who manage to get this unit to Supreme Plus, or if I have other footages of people doing some play testing with this unit at a higher tier in terms of content pushing, then we will review this unit further. So without further ado, let's run through the ultimate first. So Ancient Tenacity, as usual, I'm not going to go word by word. I'm just going to briefly describe the ability and then talk about the buffs and stuff. So there's two part passive, right? When his HP ratio drops below 30%, retreats to the back line, take roots to recover HP. And while rooted is unaffected and unable to move, normal attack becomes ranged and deal damage. Active attacks an enemy, knocks them into the air with the adjacent enemies, dealing damage plus with additional HP numbers. And increase in level increases the damage there. Okay, so I'll say this is a very simple, straightforward control ultimate, right? Very, very similar to Danny's one. Danny's one roots people in place. But one thing that I think Ulmus have, which Danny doesn't, is his ability to transform from a tank to a support. I don't know how good that is because, in a sense, if his HP falls below 30%, then he becomes a support. Then who's gonna tank on the front line? Like, yes, the second and third ability is gonna provide shield for your frontliner, but I don't think like your other units are gonna have more defensive stats than a tank. So they are probably not going to tank as good. So that's one thing which I am very doubtful about. Like, how good is this fall back into the backline mechanic? And another thing which was already tried and tested is that when his HP ratio falls below 30%, this is not like a torrent revive and come back and then become a ranged unit kind of thing. It's more like gonna move to the backline, become this immobile backline tree, which means that this unit is still gonna get insta-killed by OD. So that's not going to slow OD down. So that's one of the biggest problems for Wilders. That is OD in arena, because OD is just going to throw the ultimate, starts to melt one frontliner tank, and then starts to melt the rest of the Wilders backline. But I mean, it doesn't really matter too much because Wilders indeed freaking powerful in arena, and there's a lot of other better tanks to go with them. But if Ulmus was a revive ability, it would definitely have made him a lot better against OD in your PvP settings. But I'll say this skill is pretty straightforward, just a simple slam, control with a little bit of damage. Then we take a look at the second and third skill. Verdant Shield provides a shield that lasts for 10 seconds, and when the shield break deals damage, and if he's rooted, he'll grant the shield to the frontmost ally instead. So if you increase the level all the way to level 4 max level, you get 35%, when with 3 skill points, right, you can get up to 44%, which is effectively giving you 1.4 times HP, because this skill has a downtime of 4 seconds, right? 14-second cooldown with a 3-second with a 10-second duration. So 4-second downtime means permanently you are, I'll say close to permanently, right? You are getting a massive shield. And on top of having a massive shield, The third skill, Way of the Forest, allows Almer to recover a percentage of his lost HP per second, and when rooted, he will recover energy instead. So increase in level, increases the heal amount. So I'll say, based on just the first 3 skill, right, Almer is probably a more defensive tanky support compared to Danny, who is more control centric. So Almer's kit, at least based on the first 3 skill, is okay, I'm gonna stun people, I'm gonna like just be super duper tanky, and then I'm gonna recover HP so that I don't die, and then I'm gonna soak up damage from there. And then he's gonna be further supported by the EX weapon skill, which is Prowling Roots, where he's able to extend the effect of the control by 2 seconds when an enemy is knocked down, knocked into the air, or affected by other displacement effects. So in this also deals a little bit more damage and only can affect the same enemy once every 10 seconds. So increase the level, increases the damage dealt, and then allows him to gain life drain, which will make him a lot tankier as well because he also has a few skill that deals damage. So his seasonal skill is Lock On Projectile, which shoots a projectile at the target for every 2 seconds your control effect lasts on the target. So this additional damage, which works really well with the life drain, which also works really well with this unit having a lot of HP, with the Verdant Barrier, which naturally gives him like 1.35 times at base level HP every 10 seconds, right, with a 4-second downtime, with the ability to self-regen. So a very, very defensive unit, more defensive than Danny. So this unit is so similar to Danny that, like, I don't know whether or not this unit is going to be better, because based on what I observe right here, I think Danny is going to be a lot better from the control perspective, because as a standalone tank, right, Danny has so much more debuffing ability, has taunt. One thing which our dear Groot doesn't have is the ability to taunt the enemy. So as much as taunting doesn't sound great on paper, it's actually quite a disruptive skill, because if you taunt at the right time, you might be able to disrupt your enemy's ultimate. So yes, our dear Groot over here is very tanky, right? He has an AoE stun, he has the ability to increase the control duration while dealing damage when you got displacement effect, knock into the air, knock down. So this part, I think he works with obviously Ardent Iron, because Ardent is rooted, which is sort of like a knockdown. I'm not too sure whether Ardent works, but Iron definitely works because Iron's ultimate is a displacement effect. I know for a matter of fact, Danny should also work with this unit. So I mean, you can run both tanks together, obviously a dual tank strategy, maybe in your PvE content pushing, because over here you have rooted. So I think rooted should be considered knockdown as well. Not too sure whether or not the wording works that way, so we'll wait for more testing to confirm that. But if you just take a look at the initial skill impressions, I'll say I don't know whether or not Almer will overtake Danny, because I did say that Almer is probably the meteor tank, but is he a better tank? Because in the later stages of the game, based on his kit right here, I feel that he's probably gonna be like a PvP / AFK stage pushing machine. But right now, in the later stages, in terms of content pushing, this unit is not gonna out-tank the light of Resto. So your late game whales or end game players they're gonna build him, but they're not gonna use him, because Resto is so much tankier than this guy, right? Because of the damage reduction, because of the ability to heal, because of the ability to gain defenses, which makes Resto such a beast in tanking. In terms of Almer's case, based on the initial testing, all the top end players don't think he's as tanky as Resto, unfortunately. So in terms of the deficit pushing side, in terms of the better tank, Resto is probably better than him. In terms of the better wildest position, a little bit awkward, because I think he's gonna compete with Danny. So my personal take is Danny is the better controller unit, right? The better controller tank. But if you need a super tanky wildest tank that just soaks up damage, I think he could be better, because he has so much HP, he has some regen, and the only thing that he's lacking is just more defensive stat to make him a lot meatier, and maybe a taunt so that he can redirect attention away. So I don't know, he just feels like a very meh unit, and I don't know whether or not he's a replacement for Danny or is he an equal with Danny. There could be a possibility that you pair Ulmus with Danny. The issue now is this unit's job, or what this unit wants to do, is just to soak up damage on the front line and then provide additional control support for your control teams, which are quite prevalent in terms of pushing of contents, because when you're deficit pushing, control is going to be key. So Almer is definitely going to find some use, but we are not very sure whether or not he will be better than the likes of Danny, right? He's definitely not gonna out tank Fresto in terms of the tanking compartment because of the kit, but at least in terms of the control side of things, he will be competing with Danny, and that's where we will take the next few days to figure out whether or not he will be there. Okay, but with that, let us move on to the 1 unit testing and pulling session. Let's go. Okay, so in the name of science, I actually put for Groot all the way to Mythic with my Zeebo's account. Not enough resources to further increase his level, so we will stick to Mythic for now to just see his tankiness. But one issue which I foresee this unit not doing as well compared to Fresto is the lack of defensive buffs or attack down on the enemy, or any way to reduce the enemy's damage output. Because I actually did a few runs with this unit before I start recording, and you guys can see for yourself, right, what I mean by this is one thing which I think this unit might have difficulty overcoming, because you can see that the enemies are hitting super duper hard. So even if he's able to generate his own shield, even if he's able to regenerate HP, he's still not going to be as powerful as the likes of Fresto in terms of deficit pushing. Because in a sense, right, I think what makes Danny, Fresto a good deficit pusher, number one for Danny's case is more of control, more of slowing your enemy down, as well as boosting her own defense so that she takes less damage. Whereas for Fresto's case, Fresto is able to boost his own defense as well as have a massive 30% damage reduction. Whereas these two, right, defense boost as well as damage reduction, they're not present in this unit. So yes, he's able to generate a shield, but he's still taking so much damage, and when you're talking about deficit pushing, might not be the best idea, right? Even though this unit might work in the standard Iron comp, obviously, but would you want this unit over Torrent? Will you want this unit over the likes of Danny? That will be another question which has to be answered, because yes, this unit does move to the back line to provide the shield for Iron, which would definitely make that comp a little bit better, but he's still a physical attacker, which means that he doesn't really benefit from all the magical debuffs of that team. So I don't know, this unit is really in a very, very awkward position, because like, as much as he sounds like a good tanker on paper, but he's also really not that good of a tanker, because there's just so many good units. And you can see, right, just at 30% this unit shifts from the front line to the back line, and then all of a sudden you just lose your frontline unit who is supposed to be there to tank up damage. So I don't know, feels very, very weird with this unit. And I guess based on my initial few rounds of testing, I honestly don't think this unit will be meta. I don't even know whether or not this unit will replace anyone for AFK challenge, because for the meta tank compartment, right, is definitely Fresto. Like, the late game is Fresto, Smokey, and I don't think Almer is gonna overtake that team by any means. And if you're talking about a tank for the Iron Carolina combo, this tank might work, right, to stack up all the controls on all the units and then you just hold the enemies down. But at the same time, Almer is not exactly that powerful as a deficit pushing tank. So that's one issue which I see could be an issue for the team as well. So Almer's first impression for me is slightly awkward, too many replacement, and probably not going to be meta. So that's it for this video. Thank you very much for tuning in. Let me know what you think about this Groot man over here, and whether or not you put for him, and whether or not this is the unit that you have been looking forward to. Thank you very much for watching. Do remember to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys again in my next video. Bye guys.